Hey gang, it's time for Collection Connection, the game that's just an excuse to talk about records. On Monday, over on the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel, my brother Plastic Eric showed New Order's seminal 1983 electronic post-punk album, Power, Corruption, and Lies. That's one I own too, so I will ruminate on that for a few moments, and then connect that to an album in my own collection that shares some facet or quirk in common with it, which today is the second studio album from the excellent Stockholm indie pop outfit Shout Out Louds. It's called Our Ill Wills, and it came out in '07. Now I'm not going to tell you what the connection is, instead we challenge you to figure it out. Put your guesses in the comments along with anything else you might have to say about either these bands or records, and the first correct guess will earn a shout out in my brother's next video. But first let's officially reveal the connection between the prior pair of albums, those being The Strokes' New Abnormal and New Order's Power, Corruption, and Lies. And the connection there is that both albums use as their covers museum pieces. As I mentioned in the previous video, The Strokes had the Basquiat painting Bird on Money. That's what it's called, and it is hanging in the Rubel Museum in Miami. And the Fontaine-Latour's Basket of Roses, which is the cover for Power, Corruption, and Lies, and hangs in the National Gallery in London. And that was guessed successfully. We got a new name here, Angel H, 6985. I had to refer to the number there. But congratulations for a correct guess on that. And now let's see what we can do about this episode's connection. So with that, let's get on with the show. Alrighty then, let's knock this out, shall we? Eric did talk about Power, Corruption, and Lies. I do have the album. Here's my copy right here. And I also have it on vinyl, but I have it as decor, framed down in my basement. One of about 15 albums that have met that fate. But it is down there. It's a good album. It's not my favorite New Order album. They did sometime in the last 15 years sort of deluxe remasters, made them into 2-disc editions, and I did get those 2-disc editions for Brotherhood, Low Life, and Technique. And then I got the Substance reissue that was from just a couple of years ago. They also did like a high ticket price box set for Power, Corruption, and Lies. And I think more than one, maybe they're doing them sort of in order. But that's not the remaster I'm talking about. That kind of came in its own like pink box, changed the art style, and interestingly went back to the original lineup. And from what I can tell, does not actually include Blue Monday in its sort of original form. It does have several remixes of Blue Monday in as bonus tracks. It's the kind of thing that would drive me insane, sort of, to lose the track like that. And Yazoo did it with, they reissued their catalog, which was only 2 albums long, in a box set that frustratingly did not include Situation, which was a bonus track added onto the CD of Upstairs at Eric's. And it means that this Yaz box set that is supposedly the complete recordings of, sort of, or their 2 albums anyway, combined, doesn't have the original version of Situation on it, on the CDs. I think it's maybe there on like a DVD track or something, but that's very frustrating. I would be frustrated with the Power, Corruption, and Lies that didn't have the original Blue Monday on it, even though it was not originally on the album, as Eric noted. But I didn't rebuy Power, Corruption, and Lies, so this is still my original copy of it. But yeah, while it's not my favorite New Order album, I will note that my most played New Order track out of everything that I have from their catalog is actually Your Silent Face. So I do love that song, and it really transports me in a way that few songs do. It's so kind of giant and floaty and dreamy, and yet it's juxtaposed with these really low-key lyrics, and I think the combination of the two makes it just a really memorable song. And so I don't know that I would call it my favorite New Order track, but I do love Your Silent Face, and it is my most played New Order song. So a little bit of trivia for you. But the other tracks, it starts off with Age of Consent, which is great. It's funny to me, Eric mentioned Leave Me Alone, which is one that I haven't got to. It's the last track on the original track listing. It is followed by The Beach, which is sort of the instrumental-ish take on Blue Monday. But yeah, I'm not that familiar with the last couple of tracks on here. It's rare that I got to the end, I guess, of the album. They only have about 3 or 4 plays each, those last couple of tracks. So I was interested to hear that it was Eric's favorite song off the album. I'll have to give that a little more airtime. And I almost made that the connection. Leave Me Alone. I have about a half dozen different tracks called Leave Me Alone on different albums. But I thought, that's not all that fun. And so I went with a different connection that I believe, if you watched Eric's video and you watch this video, should be pretty straightforward and easy. But I know what the answer is, so maybe I'm deluding myself. So let's move on to that connection, which is Our Ill Wills from Shout Out Louds. It's interesting, their first album called Howl Howl Gaff Gaff was an album that I picked up on in 2005. Often at the end of the year, I will look at different outlets' year-end best of and see if there's anything that had completely gone under my radar that I want to give a shot. And that album by Shout Out Louds was one of those things. I picked it up. I liked it tremendously, and yet I kind of never went back to them, at least not for years and years and years. When their follow-up, their sophomore album came out, Our Ill Wills, I think I heard maybe in passing that it was kind of a bummer, a little bit of a disappointment. I think it is a little bit perhaps of a Pinkerton. Weezer had that second album that everybody hated right when it first came out, but has been reassessed into one of the essential Weezer albums. I think Our Ill Wills, neither Howl Howl Gaff Gaff or Our Ill Wills or Shout Out Louds in general ever got as big as Weezer, but I think there has been a reassessment of the second album, and it is a little more dour, a little more dream pop than the first, which was very sort of stripped down, super catchy, joyful pop songs. This one brings it down a little bit, not so much that I necessarily agree with the downer of an album sort of takes that were issued at the time. And in fact, the track Normandy, which was a single off of this album, caught my ear in 2020. It was one of those things in the year of 2020, you know what I'm talking about, that I started looking up old bands, and Shout Out Louds was one that I was like, wow, they put out a number of albums since then, and they've been just off my radar. They've never really scored a hit that I'm aware of in the US. But this track Normandy super caught my ear, and I was like, yeah, I want to hear more of that. So I ordered that and their then current album, which was still a few years old, I think at that point, called Ease My Mind, because that featured a track called Jumbo Jet that I liked a lot, and Paola, or Paola, maybe it's a name. But yeah, I ended up ordering these through a local record store, picking them up when you couldn't go into the shop in person. You had to knock on the door. They handed you your order out the door. And so there was this 15-year gap between acquiring Howl Howl Gaff Gaff, their first album, and picking up a couple of more albums. And they have since released one more album called Home that was another huge pain in the butt to get a hold of, because it came out, I believe, in like March of maybe 2022 or something like that, and it was not issued on CD until November or December of that year. So one of those things where I slowly became aware that release dates don't mean what they used to anymore, and different formats due to different pipelines don't always come out at the same time, and quite often it was the CD, it felt, that got the short end of the stick, and it's like, we'll get it out eventually, maybe. But it did take a good 8-9 months for the CD to come out, but I do have that one. And yeah, this is a great little band out of Stockholm. They make me think of Bell and Sebastian in a way, in that all the songs sound mid-tempo, even though the tempos range all over the place. There is a sort of mid-temponess to them. It's like when they rock out, they never really rock out, and they don't really have dirges either. Everything just feels like a song, like a composition. Crowded House makes me think of that kind of thing too, and Camper Van Beethoven. They don't necessarily sound like, well, nobody sounds like Camper Van Beethoven but Camper Van Beethoven, but they have their own sound, but it kind of carries on the tradition of just indie songwriting. And I think after that first album, they got a little less hooky, but still like really good songs. And I do think actually Normandy has got a great little hook on the bass, or maybe it's low on the guitar, I'm not sure, but I do love that song. And yeah, so dynamically, and they also have a female who usually does kind of backup vocals, but she seems to get lead vocals on a track every album, and that's something that is kind of very Bell and Sebastian. But they seem to have this sort of melancholy that pervades their music, and wistfulness that also really makes me think of Bell and Sebastian. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I was going to say, but I would highly recommend Shout Out Louds. I don't know if it's going to be the kind of thing that Eric will like, but this is 100% right in my sweet spot of the kind of music that I love to listen to. I still have a couple of albums that I'm missing from their discography, but I have 4 of their albums now, and they're all good. So I would say our Ill Wills, which I'll note, has, I was going to call it Semaphore, but this is not Semaphore on the cover. Semaphore is like help, kind of flags doing that kind of thing. This is the International Code of Symbols on the cover there, and spells out something, but what could it spell out? I don't know. So I'll throw this over to Eric, and he will try to find a connection to something in his collection that he can connect to the Shout Out Louds with Our Ill Wills. And you can look for that on Monday on his channel, The Plastic Soundwave Cult. And with that, I think I've said everything that I was going to say. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Good show, Ponsonby.